Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you how to download and install FreeNAS on a VirtualBox virtual machine. So the first thing we need to do is download the CD image installer. Open up your browser, type in FreeNAS, and here we are. Click on download. No, thank you. Send me the download page, please. And these are one of the requirements for the hardware requirements for FreeNAS. It has to be a 64-bit CPU enabled and a minimum of 8 GB RAM. So you click on this and you download the ISO, and the most recent version is 11.1. And since I've already downloaded the file, I'm not gonna click on download and download it. And once the download has finished, do a 255 SHA-256 checksum, and this is it. So minimize this, go to hash calculator, locate the file, and here's the file, and get the hash calculator, and we'll compare it to the this checksum, and this should be the same, and it is the same. Okay, good. So we've got the authentic FreeNAS CD installer. Close the browser, open up your VirtualBox manager, and then create a new virtual machine. And we're gonna call this F for FreeNAS. What does this call this NAS? Type would be BSD because it's just like pfSense is based on FreeBSD. And I'm going to choose FreeBSD 64-bit. Click on next. And the minimum requirement was 8 GB. So I'm going to give it 8 GB. I think it's 8096. That should be 8 GB. Yeah. Click on next and create a virtual hard drive. We're going to create a VirtualBox disk image. I'm going to do it fixed. We'll call it NAS. We don't really need 16 GB. Minimum should be for it to work should be around 8 GB. 16 is good because that means you can do a few more things with it, like make it into a domain controller for your network. So I'll do 16. Now this is gonna take a while, so I'm gonna pause the video and come back when it's done. Okay, the machine is ready. The hard drive is the virtual hard drive has been created. So let's do some more configuration on this virtual machine before we start it up. So go to system, as usual, disable floppy, change the boot order. It's fine. 8 GB RAM processor. Let's give it all 4 cores. And go to display. Let display. We'll leave it as default. Now, the controller, where I'm gonna mount the CD image for the FreeNAS installer, like that. Click on OK, and let's create in a new controller. Let's call it a SATA controller, or we could just leave it as IDE. And audio, will disable audio because this is a FreeNAS appliance where there's no need for an audio. And we'll select internal network, not DMZ. Let's choose LAN because everything else is installed on LAN. And since this is a Unix system, it's a paravirtualized network adapter. Is the drivers for that is native, so I won't need any drivers for that. So I'll choose this one, and plus all of these are like a gigabyte or maybe 100 megabytes of bandwidth. So this will give me 10 Gbps. So I'm going to choose this because I want my network fast. And everything else is good. And one thing I gotta do is FreeNAS installs the whole operating system on the one hard disk. So it's gonna install everything on here, but it keeps the storage separate on separate disks. So right now I need to add a couple of virtual hard drives for it to use it as a storage. So click on controller ID and add hard disk, create new disk, and next let's do it fixed, and let's do it 20 GB. I think that should be more than enough. And I'll call this ZFS1. That's for ZFS file system. That's what it stores on. So create. This is going to take a while. So I'll pause the video and come back when it's done. Okay, the first disk has been created for storage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 more or maybe 3 more, and then I'll come back and continue from there. So I'm going to click on that. Create another new disk. Next, fix size. Do this 20 again. We'll make 20. 3 virtual ZFS partition disk. And if you're American, that's ZFS. Second disk, ZFS. Sorry, ZFS2. Great. And this is what I'm going to do, and then when I'm done I'll come back and continue from there. So I'm going to pause the video. Okay, I just realized that for the IDE controller there's a limit on there, so it can't have more than 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another controller. I'm going to add a SATA controller on there, and then I'm going to move these on here, the ZFS1, ZFS2, and ZFS3. So remove that on here, on the plus sign, add hard disk, choose existing, and we'll go to my Virtualbox share folder. Here it is on NAS, ZFS1. Then add another hard drive, choose existing, ZFS2, and then I'm going to create a new one. So that would be on this one and create new, fix. This would be ZFS3, also 20 GB. Create. Okay, so we're done. We've created 3 virtual drives that we're gonna use as storage for the FreeNAS, and I'm thinking to move the boot hard drive onto the same controller as well. So the way to do that would be to delete and then click on the SATA controller, click on the hard drive, choose existing. Here it is, NAS, and let's just change the SATA port that is connected to. We'll change this to temporarily to 8 and this to 0. So 1 would be 1 0 1. Okay, 0 1 2 3, and we'll change this to 3. Change this to 2, sorry, 2, change this to 3, and change this to 1. There you go. 0, 1, 2, 3. And we're done with that, and click on OK. And just before we start the machine, let's start the pfSense router. You're gonna need some internet connectivity. Just minimize this so it starts up, and we'll start the Linux Mint client as well so we can administer NAS. We'll minimize this as well. Before we boot up the NAS installation virtual machine, we'll just wait for these two to finish. Okay, that's done. pfSense. I got the Linux Mint machine. That's done as well. So let's just log in just in case. Minimize this. And now we'll start the NAS. FreeNAS installer. Again. Enter. All. Now, this is the one we chose to be the boot hard drive, and these other three we'll use as storage. So we're just gonna select the one, the 16 GB one, and then we're gonna press enter. So this will erase all partitions and data on 88.0. You can't use ADA for sharing data. Installing flash media refer no installing a hard drive. Okay. Proceed with installation. Yes. Let's give it a password because this is the root password of for the root user. And we're gonna need this. Okay. Now it gives you an option. How do you wanna? What kind of a bootloader do you wanna install? Boot via BIOS or which is the legacy one, and the new one UEFI. So I've in my experience I've had trouble with UEFI, so I'm gonna choose BIOS, the legacy one. Now this is gonna install. It's gonna take a while, so I'll pause the video and I'll come back and take it from there once it's done. Okay, so we're done with the installation. Click on OK, and we're gonna choose shutdown system because we have to take out the disk installer from the virtual machine because we don't need that anymore. Okay, let's go back to Virtualbox Manager. Click on Settings, under Storage, remove the CD drive, and also remove the IDE controller. So we have only one left here. And go to under Systems and disable the boot order for the CD drive, and click on OK, and start the machine again. Okay, the NAS machine has been booted up. The thing is, the first initial boot up process is pretty long, so you're gonna have to wait a while. So now it started, and it's already assigned an IP address, and we're gonna use this IP address to access the web administration page on the browser. So we'll go back to our Linux client machine, open up Firefox, type in the address. What was it? 11.11. There you go. And there you go. You're on the login page, and the password that we type in the password that we gave when we were installing it during the installation process. So I'm going to type in that password. Press enter. Don't save. Now, the first thing on your first boot up, it's going to take you through an initial configuration wizard. So, but I do not want to do this, and we'll leave it as it is. So we didn't go through the wizard, the initial wizard, and we didn't set up anything. The first thing we need to do, that I usually do, is change the host name. It's nas.lab.com with the domain name. Click on OK. There you go. Go under generals. Let's do both HTTP. Well, not just yet. Let's just keep it HTTP. Certificate, no certificates. If you want to bind this to anything, we can bind to a particular web address. But I don't want to bind this to any particular web address. I want to bind it to every other address, even if it changes. And this is okay. Again, English and Melbourne, Australia. Go up, down. There you go. And click on save. And now we also need to change the NTP servers, because I don't want on my FreeNAS server to go and pull this NTP server. I'm going to make the NTP my local pfSense router as my NTP server. So I'll enter the address over here. NTP server will give the address say ps.lab.com. Burst through. I burst. Let's keep it false. Prefer this one. And force. Click on OK. And we'll disable the other ones. These ones. Or we could just delete it. I'll keep this one for now, because this one hasn't been configured yet. So I'll do that later, but I'll leave the entry to that for now. Go back to the systems, general looks good. I can change the logs level. Keep it just info for now. On boot. Boot is fine. Status, boot is fine. Right, and there's only one. Okay, and email advanced. Okay. Use serial console. No, no. Enable screensaver for the console. No. Power saving naming. No. Show console messages in the footer. Okay, let's turn this on. It's gonna show the console messages in the footer of this page. It's back. I'll enable auto tune. MOTD banner. Let's change it to. Let's keep it a default. Okay. Use FQDN logging, yes, so I know who's doing what server is this and all that. Click on save. There you go, you got your console messages in the footer. We know what's happening. And I want to change this to from nas at lab.com. We'll change this. We'll give it a later the email address of the email server and account details later, because I haven't set up the email yet. Here you can do a check for the next update if there's any available, and these are the update tree, and this is the stable one we're using. These are the nightlies and the nightlies SDK. This is the older version of FreeNAS, and we're just going to keep it stable and check now. We're going to just check if there are any updates been released. No updates available. Okay, good. Credentials, alert services, certificates, support. Seems good. Account, I can create accounts and groups for the system. I can assign cron jobs, shutdown and scripts, rsync tasks, and smart tests on this tab. Network. I haven't given it a default gateway, so I'll just give the default gateway right here. Default gateway for my network is .1. The name server is also the same gateway. Click on save. Global configuration successfully updated. On interfaces, no interfaces added here because we're just using the default one. VTNet, no link aggregation lags, interfaces, no devices, sector routes, no VLANs, no nothing. You know what? Let's add an interface. This is the network device we have. We'll call this, you know what? VTNet 0 as well. And instead of giving a DHCP address, let's give it a static address. Because since this is an essential server service on your network, you can't have your IP address change if the DHCP is enabled in the middle of copying a file or something, and the host gets disconnected. We can't have that because this is essential services are run on this storage server. So I'll give it 10.99.99.2, because you'll remember .1 is assigned to our pfSense router, our gateway, and the DHCP dynamic range starts from .10 and ends in 254. So we can assign anything within the dynamic range, so it has to be within the static unassigned range. So the unassigned range is from .2 to .9. So I'm going to use the first one in that unassigned range as the FreeNAS IP address for this server. And then I'm going to click on the net mask. I could give 32, but no, I'll give 24. Because we might add a couple of more IP addresses to this, virtual IP addresses and so on and so forth. So I'm going to leave it at 24. And then click on OK. And we're immediately going to get disconnected. The reason for that is I've changed the IP address, and the IP address on the DHCP server is still assigned as .11. So I'll go and see if I can access .2. There you go. And then type in the password, click on OK. You're logged in again. That's done. This is done. We can add a few more name servers on here if you want. And this is the IPv6 default gateway since we're not using IPv6, so I'm going to leave this blank. And this is our interface, the only interface on this machine. You might add a few more, like a link aggregator or a couple of VLANs, but for now we're going to leave it as is. Then we'll go into the storage tab, click on volume manager, and this is where we're going to create our volume pool. So we're going to call this tank. I'm not extending it. There are 3 in there, so I think I can RAID Z. Yeah, here you go. 3 will give you RAID Z. These are the only options available because we have only 3 disks. If it was, if you had if you had 4 more than 3, we'll have a Z2 option here, but it's not available because we don't have that many disks. So click on these, select all these 3 drives, storage, and we'll make them into a RAID Z or a RAID 5 RAID set. And click on existing data will be cleared. Once you click on add volume, whatever data is on these hard drives, it's gonna get formatted onto with the ZFS or the ZFS file system. Click on add volume. It's gonna take a while. And there you go, we have a volume. And here we can click on this and create our data sets. And in a RAID 5 or a RAID Z setup, this is how much is available of data storage, because it was 20 gigabytes of data on each hard drive that I created. And after the redundancy and parity for the redundancy, this is what we'll be left with: 34 gigabytes of data. So let's create our first data set. And what kind of a data set we want to create? We'll call this ISO. We're going to store our ISO images on here. Standard sync. Here LZ4 Unix. Let's go Windows for this. And click on add dataset. Oh, that's done. You can create snapshots of those datasets, one of those datasets, and volumes, application tasks, periodic snapshot tasks. So there's a lot of stuff we can do with this. Now let's go to directory. As I was said before, you can add this and make this FreeNAS server part of a directory domain using either an Active Directory domain or an LDAP server, NIS, so on and so forth. And let's go down to sharing. Now, since we created that dataset, the ISO dataset, now we have to create a share for that, so it'll be available for the people on the network. We can create an Apple AFP type of share, Unix NFS share, WebDAV, Windows SMB share, or a block iSCSI block share. So I'm going to click on Windows and create a Windows share. And I'm going to locate that data set on the tank. Called ISLs. Uses the home share. No. So let's open the advanced. And we'll call this ISO share. And it will hold our ISO images. by default. Export browsable to network clients. If we tick this, enable this, check this. Once we go to our network in our browser, on our Explorer or file manager, we go onto the server host on the network file manager. We'll see this as a share under NAS. So I'll leave this on because we need to see this. If I don't want it listed, I'll just untick this and it won't show up until I type the whole share address for it. I'll show you what I mean later on. Everything's fine, and click on OK. And the service wasn't enabled, so yes, enable the service. And it'll be here. Now it's running. And it'll start on boot. Smart will also start on boot. Since this is a virtual environment, what I'll do is I'll untick this. I don't want it running on boot. And there you go. If you don't click, you get your new share. There's one thing I forgot to do. I forgot to assign some permissions on to this data set. The owner for this is root, and owner group is wheel. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a user for this so we can access this via the SMB share. I'll create my own name. Create a new private group for the user. Yes. Create home directory. No. Shell name. Let's give it. There's no email just yet. And a password. Locked user. No. Permit sudo. No. And everything looks good. Yeah. Click on OK. And we'll create this user. And then we're going to assign this user the permissions on that ISO share that we created on the dataset. So go back to storage, click on ISO dataset, change permissions, choose the user that I created. Permission type Windows, okay, because we need this. Set permission recursively, whatever's in that folder or dataset will be assigned these permissions. Change. That's done. And we should have, let's go services and restart the Windows SMB service. There you go. I'll minimize the browser, open up my computer, and browse network. There you go. See our NAS on NAS, and we see that ISO share on this NAS. Now, if we didn't, as I said before, if I didn't check that list be browsable for that share, this won't show up. So I have to manually type in that the share address. Let's click on here. It's going to ask you for username and password. Yes. Work group should be. Did I set up the work group? No. Go back to SMB. Click on this configuration and change this to lab. The NAS alias. Domain logons, and we can bind the service to one of the particular IP addresses, but no, we'll just leave it open to any IP address. But okay. Stop and restart. Minimize. Go back to Majai. We'll change the domain to lab. Password is same admin until you log out. Yeah, sure. And here we are. Now we can copy any ISOs that we download from the internet, and we can save stuff over here, and we can create a few more data sets and shares on there. So let's download something and save something on there. Create a new file. s.txt. There you go. And this will be shareable across the network. And once we're done, we can unmount, disconnect from the drive, minimize, and unmount. Services, plugins, and jails, and even you can create virtual machines on this. But since this is a virtual environment, this probably won't work. You can create jails, but I'll show you that later. Reporting stats. Everything looks good. System load, CPU usage, disk usage, then memory. We've got 8 GB of RAM and barely 2 GB is in use. And we've got 2 gigabytes of RAM as swap for paging file, and it's it is empty. It's not even used. Network, these are the network traffic stats. These are the partition stats. These are the root, how much of the root is used, the space, which is about less than 1 gigabytes. And this is our volume, the tank volume that we created, and it's 34 GB, and it's mostly empty, nearly empty actually. And this is the data set that we created. Shows you how much is available, and this is the disk space for the jails. And no jails have been created, so it's mostly empty. These are the system stats. About 80 processes are running. Uptime is 20 minutes. We've had this uptime, this machine running for 20 minutes now. iSCSI reports for the SCSI shares. Then ZFS. And you can run the wizard again if you want, if you click on here. And this will take you to support if you want to file some bug reports or things of that nature. And guide, this is the user guide for the documentation for using this FreeNAS server. Okay, and then I'm gonna log out, close the browser, and that's it. But what I will do, one more thing that I'll do is I'll go change the static IP on the DHCP server on my pfSense. So let's go to ps.lab admin. This is the username, password that I set up after the initial configuration. Okay, let's go to status and DHCP leases. LM FreeNAS 11, but we've changed this. So what we'll do is do this, take the MAC address, delete this, go into services, DHCP server, enable, and we'll go down below here and add a static mapping. Paste in that MAC address. IP address was 10.99.99.2. Host name was NAS. Description will write FreeNAS server. And then click on save. Apply changes. That's that. And one more thing, I think I'll go to the DNS resolver, and instead of typing in the IP address every time, I'll use the NAS domain name. So if I do this, register DHCP static mappings in the DNS resolver, it will register a DNS entry in the DNS resolver service that's running on here, both dynamic and static. So I'm going to click on save, apply changes. Good. Log out, check something. Let's type in ps.lab.com, and here you go. If I just type ps, that should also work. Ps slash, and let's try NAS. That also works. Let's try the whole domain with the whole domain .lab.com, and that also works. So let's just log in and switch off, shut down the FreeNAS server. Let's just shut it down. There you go, it's shutting down. It's gonna take a while. So that's the video, the short video how to install and configure basic configuration of FreeNAS on a virtualized lab environment. And from here on, I will do and install and configure a few more services on the FreeNAS and the pfSense, and I'll add a few more virtual machines to give you an idea of what more services you can run on your virtual lab, and configure a couple of more scenarios of settings. So this is the end of the basic setup configuration of a virtual lab on Virtualbox on a Windows host machine. And next, we'll go with a couple of things on the FreeNAS, like I'm going to make the FreeNAS server into a domain controller for the network, and then connect a couple of services on the network to that domain controller. So that's it. We have reached a significant milestone in setting up our lab environment. So before we do anything else, let's just make a snapshot of what we've done so far. So just in case we screw up something with the configuration for anything else, like the pfSense or the FreeNAS, so we don't have to reinstall the whole thing again. So let's just make a couple of snapshots using the VirtualBox manager. So let's start this up. and all three machines are powered off. So I'm going to make a snapshot of this first, the Linux Mint client, and switch to the snapshot view. And let's just take a snapshot of the current state like this. Give it a name. Let's call this fresh install and updated, because I just installed the system and updated all the packages. Click on OK, and then let's go with the PS1. Click on take the snapshot. Also fresh install and updates applied. And it's done. And let's go with this NAS and click on take snapshot. Fresh install again and updates. And there you have it. That's done. So whenever we change something, you can always come back, click on the snapshot, and then restore to the previous snapshot. Or we can just delete the snapshot and look at the properties and so on and so forth. So this is how we'll restore after we've made some changes. Click on this button. As always, if you have any questions or requests on any topic for me to cover on this channel, then leave them under this video in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button.